Okay, hello, welcome everyone. This is our first dive-in event called Mentorship Goes Both Ways. I'm Jenna Petrone, the project manager at No Water, No Life, and I've been working with No Water, No Life since 2014, and I'm honored to facilitate our first dive-in event, which was an idea of mine I had back in the fall, so it's exciting to see it all come together. So, this new quarterly event series are roundtable discussions with our partners, advisors, and NextGen bloggers, discussing their views on freshwater resources, watershed issues, and the value of mentorship. Now, as a friendly reminder, please keep yourselves muted, but feel free to keep your video on if you're comfortable with it. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat, and I can try to sprinkle them in whenever I get the chance. And at the end of this call, we're going to be opening the floor to questions. So now I'm going to hand off the microphone to Allison, who is going to introduce No Water, No Life and our guests for today.
Thanks, Jenna, and thank you everyone here for diving in with us to explore stewardship of freshwater resources. For those who are new to us, No Water, No Life combines the power of photography, science, and local knowledge in order to expand awareness of the values of freshwater, its threats, and possible solutions. Thankfully, No Water, No Life has had strong support from our many partners and advisors, hundreds of scientists and stewards we've interviewed, and dozens of bloggers. And in that collegial spirit, this dive-in shares the exciting synergy between No Water, No Life, our NextGen bloggers, and those graciously serving as mentors. 2 years ago this month, as COVID closed schools, we offered students and recent graduates our blog platform as a place to publish their research. And since then, over 20 NextGen student bloggers have posted more than 55, and I'm sorry, I just lost my place. The screen changed on me, but they've published more than 55 blogs on many, many wonderful different topics. So having found my place again, we have today in front of us two No Water, No Life heroes who are very special to us. They are both from the banks of New Jersey's Raritan River and are here to share their river stories. As Mark Twain said, the river is a wonderful book with a new story to tell every day. Heather Fenyk, I met about 10 years ago through No Water, No Life advisor Judy Shaw, then chair of Rutgers University's Blaustein School. Judy's push for more science and stewardship to improve the health of New Jersey's Raritan River impacted both Heather and myself. With a PhD from Rutgers, Heather formed the Lower Raritan Watershed Partnership. Also a founder of an urban planning firm, Heather believes community engagement and collaboration of diverse partners offer the most enduring solutions. We have enjoyed sharing our focus on watershed advocacy. I met Rachel Rebello when she just graduated from Rutgers. She was seeking research and writing opportunities, and I had just seen the upsetting movie Dark Waters, documenting the traumas faced by the scientists who uncovered new pollution of our waters by PFAS, PFAS. And they are the forever chemicals found in Teflon, firefighting chemicals, and many more materials. Knowing the Raritan was full of PFAS, I urged Rachel to research that emerging issue with Heather's help. She called Heather and then researched and blogged on PFAS in the Raritan, the Columbia, and the Mississippi, our 3 US case study watersheds. Rachel is now a second-year environmental law student at Georgetown, focusing on climate-related energy issues, water contamination, environmental justice, and resource access. No Water, No Life has had 5 project managers in its 16 years, each with a Mark Twain fascination for river stories. Today, we're introducing Lydia Simmons, as our new project manager. A photographer herself after graduating summa cum laude in international studies from the University of South Florida, Lydia has worked at the Tampa Museum of Art and the USF Library Special Collections. So welcome, Lydia. You are a perfect fit for No Water, No Life. Our departing project manager, Jenna, is a No Water, No Life hero. For 8 years, she's been there when needed with creative and organizational skills. For example, she overlaid the relevant text that she found on No Water, No Life photos to create dozens of mini stories, a la Mark Twain. And No Water, No Life still shares her educational hydrographics, as we call them, to be classroom teaching tools, to sell as coasters, and to feature in our social media posts. After training Lydia, Jenna will leave to establish her own project. We will miss you, Jenna. But for now, Jenna's still with us to facilitate Heather's and Rachel's storytelling. So back to you all.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Allison. Welcome to those who came in to this event while the introduction was happening, and we're excited to have you here. I would love to, jump into the backgrounds of both Heather and Rachel, and just start with Heather. Can you please share, what initially inspired you to be a steward and a part of the freshwater resources in New Jersey? And can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am a transplant to New Jersey. I landed here in 1998 to start a master's program in city and regional planning. I had been out of the country for a few years, mostly in Southeast Asia and Central America, where I'd had a lot of opportunity to do, my work focus at that time was transportation systems planning, mostly non-motorized transportation. And I was focused on keeping communities connected, with their feet, with their bicycles to their home places. And I came to New Brunswick, New Jersey, and found a couple of interesting things. First, that folks were incredibly disconnected in a town that, for its alma mater, sings about how Rutgers University is on the banks of the old Raritan. The town itself is cut off with a highway from the waterway, the Raritan River. So that was, sort of an immediate, surprise, was how can folks connect with our waterway? And folks were also very disconnected from the earth here as well. So I had been in Central America and in Southeast Asia, where there was still an awful lot of folks who had their own plots of land for food stuff, agricultural sustenance. And in New Brunswick, the landscape was really quite contaminated with lead. And so I started working in food systems just locally as a volunteer, starting out community gardens. And after we had about a dozen community gardens off the ground here, we brought all of the community garden leads together to talk about food security in general. And it wasn't just an issue of lead in soils, but we found that an awful lot of the folks from the primarily Oaxacan community that dominates the New Brunswick demographic were fishing for consumption out of the Raritan River. Now the Raritan is a wonderful waterway, but has been sort of smacked with a lot of legacy pollutants from decades, if not a century plus, of dumping. And there's a lot of concern about not only the legacy pollutants, what type of PCBs, now PFOAs, the arsenics, the heavy metals, the leads, might be in the waterway, but what also in terms of the ongoing pollutants from stormwater flows might potentially compromise not just the fish for sustenance for folks, but also compromise the human health for when folks are going out to fish and engage with the waterway. So, making that connection with the food security work, and we started trying to find out what data was out there regarding water quality, and realized that there was really very little about the Lower Raritan. So we started, even before the idea of creating a nonprofit came about, we started with civic science, community-based volunteer water quality monitoring, and supporting the food security community in doing testing of waters to get a sense for the bacterial loads, to get a sense for oxygen in the waters, and then turning around with that data and reporting out to the community so that they have a little bit of a sense for relative risk at the time when they're going out. So that's really how I got involved. Was through food security, through concerns about disconnect from our natural spaces, our green and blue spaces. And then the LRWP just sort of developed from there. And I'll probably talk about that a little bit more later.
Thank you so much for that thorough introduction. It's quite a journey you've had to get where you are now. It's very inspiring. So Rachel, I would love to hear from you. And can you do the same? Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. So I'm a New Jersey native. I'm from South Brunswick in Central Jersey, which, while some people may debate doesn't exist, most certainly exists. In undergrad, I studied biological sciences at Rutgers University, and I always had this really deep appreciation for science and nature. And studying biology at Rutgers, I got to research different diseases. I was involved in 2 labs, one of which did research on cellular movement, which has implications in how cancer cells are able to move. And so starting from the health side of things, starting a lot of my life thinking about diseases and learning about the connections between contaminants in the environment and things that were put in the environment and how those were affecting people. In addition, looking at my own personal life and my family and seeing the effects of contaminants and exposures to pesticides. All of those things really shaped, I guess, how I've sought or how I've looked for a certain career path. And that's really what, for me, inspired me to choose environmental law and really look for a career in which I could have a say in what sorts of things are put in the environment, where I could influence what sorts of chemicals and contaminants people are exposed to, and hope that they're not exposed to those things. And so that's really a big part of how my life has changed and sort of the trajectory of my life as someone who's now a second-year law student at Georgetown. I really enjoy taking different classes, being involved with some of the agencies here in DC, and just working with other students who are also passionate about environmental work and energy law work. I'm also involved in my school's Georgetown Energy Law Group. And so that has been really interesting, just seeing the different ways in which students take their passion for the environment and take their passion for energy law and, really, really run with it and explore different opportunities, whether it's helping a company develop renewable energy systems, or whether it's litigating against parties and advocating for people who are exposed to contaminants. So it's been a journey, and I think finding No Water, No Life was a huge part of that. Coming out of undergrad, I had always really seen myself in medicine, and so realizing that I wanted to do something more advocacy oriented at the end of undergrad was a real shift for me. And so I remember looking for organizations, trying to see organizations that really matched my values and wanted to promote access to high quality resources. And so that's how I found No Water, No Life. And just in the process of talking to Allison, connecting with her, meeting other people in the legal field, and attorneys who were passionate and very knowledgeable about PFAS, such as Heather, that has been a huge part of helping me delve into law and see myself as an environmental lawyer in the future.
I loved hearing your journey too, to be honest. It's a very different one, but it's interesting to see what that shift looked like for yourself. What kind of challenges have you faced along the way in terms of your studies or, what you want to achieve?
I think the initial challenge for me was figuring out how to get into law school, figuring out what sorts of experiences are important. And I think that's where mentorship was super helpful to me. Just being able to talk to Allison, who has a lot of experience in the environmental advocacy field, that was super helpful for me. And that, that process of talking to people and as a side effect of writing articles and finding out more information about PFAS in the Raritan River, I think that helped guide, provided a lot of guidance for me and helped me figure out sort of from a starting level, okay, what is the entrance exam for law school? Okay, it's the LSAT. What are some good resources for this? It's XYZ. And so I think a lot of the challenges initially were just about being new to this area and making that shift. In school, I've found that I think learning about different courses, learning about different subjects can be a little difficult, can be a little scary. And in that sense, I've found workshops, for instance, super helpful. Workshops thrown by the school or workshops organized by other organizations. That has definitely helped me explore different opportunities in environmental law in general, and also branch out into other subject areas.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'd like to move on to a connections portion of this conversation and just start with this quote. If you want to change the world, find someone to help you paddle. And that's by William H. McRaven. And I know Rachel already touched a little bit on mentorship and how Allison and Heather kind of helped shift her perspective and this new view on her career. So I'm curious to hear from Heather, who's helped you along the way.
Oh my gosh, we are all bootstrapping this together, right? So it's the issues that we're facing globally with climate change, locally with Raritan River, legacy pollutants, ongoing stormwater management. It takes so many eyes opening, so many hands doing this work. And it's finding folks to help us paddle, but also it's seeing who's already doing the paddling and offering to lend a hand, and maybe seeing whether the boats are heading in the same direction, and making sure that they aren't necessarily going in opposite directions. So in terms of who's helped out, Allison mentioned Judy Shaw, and I absolutely have to. I wish you were here with us. I'd like her to be glowing with all of the praise that we'd put on her. I think she's traveling right now, but she really saw the need for collaborative work, for getting everyone rowing in the same direction around Raritan River, Raritan Basin issues. And she had a position at Rutgers whereby she could basically set a very long table and bring folks together for those conversations. And first of all, that was super helpful in allowing me to meet the folks at the table, but it was also super helpful in seeing how it's done. So she was a mentor both in her vision, but also in her actions, in sort of making sure that you knew how to build a big tent or set a long table. So I absolutely need to give a shout out for her. And then the title of this talk, Mentorship Goes Both Ways. I mean, it couldn't be more true. The LRWP is 100% volunteer run. I'm affiliated with Rutgers. We would not exist without the support of the student interns. So much of everything from the writing to the discovery to sort of the synthesis work, has been done in collaboration with one intern or another, and other faculty members. So the interns are making the connections with the faculty members who are making connections with others in the community. So that it's this cross-pollination. We're back to the bee thing here, as in terms of how we nurture and support each other in this process. So another long-winded response, but I think that your theme is so important to reflect on as mentorship goes both ways.
Definitely agree. I really enjoy the title of this because we're always going to be learning from each other, and it's so important to keep that energy alive. One more question for now, Heather. What has been the best advice you've ever received from a mentor?
Oh boy, this is a tough one. So I have a little fortune from a fortune cookie on my computer that was given to me by my dissertation advisor. And it says, everyone around you is rooting for you, don't give up. So I think that's maybe a nice message, not just for me, but it's true for all of us, right? Whether we realize it or not, if we have a vision, if we have, something that we are committed to, make sure that you are observant of the folks who are supporting you along that path, and know that you shouldn't necessarily give up. So that I think that's good advice, for all of us. Know that there are folks rooting for us. Don't give up. Yeah.
That is the most valuable fortune cookie I have ever heard. So that's really nice. Thank you for sharing all of that. Rachel, I know you already spoke about Allison and Heather, helping you forge this new path of yours. Would you like to speak a little bit more about your relationship with Heather and, what that looks like in terms of mentorship going both ways?
Yeah. So I met Heather through Allison. She connected the two of us when I first started off learning about PFAS, wanting to write about the Raritan River. And so Heather was a great resource and great person to talk to in terms of understanding what people on the ground, what community members were doing, what advocacy organizations were doing in order to steward the Raritan River. And as someone who was learning about all the impacts of PFAS, I really wanted that connection where I could talk about what regular people could do, how people coming from different backgrounds and coming from different levels of expertise or different fields could contribute to improving water quality. And so I remember sitting in at one of the potluck dinners, and it was a really nice event with really great food and amazing people. And just sitting there and seeing the ways in which interns, people either a few years above me or my age, were doing such incredible things about ways in which certain parts of the river could be remediated, and seeing that there were so many volunteer opportunities, that was immensely helpful to me and really an important aspect that I wanted to introduce into my work. And it's also something that has sat with me as I've studied law school. I think as students, sometimes our time isn't really our own. And sometimes we lose sight of the importance of being involved in our own local communities, in being involved with things outside of school. And so that is something that has definitely guided how I think about environmental laws, not just, addressing big things, but also looking at your own backyard and seeing what your local council is doing, and seeing how you can volunteer with others. I also want to give a shout out to Judy Schaub, because I neglected to mention her earlier when I was talking about mentorship, but she was also a huge part of connecting me with different people and reaching out to her contacts in the legal field. And so the second question that you asked Heather about advice, I kind of wanted to speak to that a little bit. because in the process of talking to her, I learned the importance of surrounding myself with people who are good at their craft. And, that's a piece of advice that has really changed the way that I look at taking certain classes, or I look at different opportunities. I'm not just looking at the subject matter itself. I'm looking at the person and the people I'm connecting with, and the people that I want to learn from. And so that's an advice that sort of ties in the mentorship and the connection, and also how I got to know Heather, and how I got to meet so many people who are really experts in their field and really great at their craft, and that I'm constantly learning from.
Thank you for sharing that. I know you are still a student, but are you experiencing anyone coming to you for mentorship at the moment?
Yeah, so during undergrad, I was involved. I was an honors college ally mentor. And so during undergrad, I mentored a couple of freshmen. And now that I'm in law school, it's so exciting seeing some of them pursue a career in law. And it's so rewarding being able to say, hey, I noticed you've just gotten into this law school or this law school. I would love to have a conversation with you about it. And, I'd love to offer whatever resources I have, or connections I have, or opportunities that I've come across that I think you would really benefit from. And so getting to that point has been really exciting, because often I feel like I'm always reaching out, and it's wonderful to be able to give back as well.
I really love that. Thank you for sharing again. And all right, so speaking of advice, that is the next section we're going to touch base on. And either Heather or Rachel can feel free to jump into these questions. So do you have any recommendations for our viewers on mentorship, community leadership, water stewardship for, different types of achievement, whether it be on an individual level or organization level?
Yeah, I might jump in here, and it's not necessarily advice, but it's sort of an experience that I'm currently steeped in, and I'm trying to make sense of it. It's a wonderful set of experiences, and sort of how to tell the story. Maybe you all can help me out with this. So one of the projects that the Lower Raritan Watershed Partnership is working on is now a new community boat build program, whereby we bring young people in. We've been working out of a former grocery store, and now we're moving to a filling station that's been left behind. And we bring young people in and teach them the craft of boat building, and along the way, so there's a little bit of skill development there. There's a story about the eventual plans of putting the boat on the Raritan River, ideas of maybe starting a rowing or a crew program, because these are crew sculls, and looking then at them as mentors for the, so we run these 8-week programs, and some people come every week even after their 8-week program, and they start doing the mentoring. They now have the skills, and they help folks out. And we have one gal who's actually now up in Maine. She started with us and not knowing a thing about boat building or about any type of woodwork. And she is now in Maine at a multi-month boat building internship. And she plans to come back and help us with growing this program. So there's this full circle opportunity of starting with folks who know nothing about a craft or about an idea, supporting them so that they then come back and support others. And I think that if in terms of advice, look for opportunities to nurture and support that, because that's how we'd find that sustainability, and the sort of the freshness to carry programs on. So we're sort of struggling with how to tell what I think is a really wonderful story. So like I said, if there are ideas about how to sort of do that much more eloquently and shorter than I just did, please let me know.
I think you did a great job.
Jenna.
And yes.
Am I on mute or can you hear me?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. I am absolutely gobsmacked, Heather, because there's a great guy on the Mississippi River who is doing and has been doing this for a long time, John Ruskey. He has the Quapaw Canoe Company, and he's teaching local Mississippians who have never gone near that river to build a canoe, to go out in canoe, to enjoy the river. And then he does long canoe trips for people who want to know the Mississippi better. You must be in touch with him. He's just fabulous. He's a real Renaissance man who not only builds boats, but he sings, he plays the guitar. He started the Delta Blues Museum in Clarksdale, Mississippi. I mean, he's just well-rounded and exciting and loves the Mississippi. So same thing. You need, I'll introduce you to.
Yeah, please, thank you. And that really is, the idea of not just building the boats, but then using what you've built, and going on a journey. So there are multiple layers of journeys. I just think is so interesting. So yeah.
Thank you for that addition, Allison. Allison has a huge, archive of contacts in her head. She's always ready to pull them out and tell a story about them. So that's very refreshing. Rachel,
and it looks like,
yes.
Let me just say, it looks like one of our advisors who's on this, Susan Leonard, has a question or a comment to make.
Well, I know
Can
that,
you
am I off mute now?
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay. I know that many years ago, the Clearwater program started a mentorship program as well. I had a high school student, this was 30 years ago, who started learning woodworking because he was working on the Clearwater and on other boats as part of that, and became very, very involved. So reaching out to high school students for that is wonderful. The what is it, the Blue School that's on Governor's Island would, I am sure, be interested in doing that. And that's pretty close to you and would have students who might be interested in being interns and getting involved. So that's where I would go in terms of that.
It's funny, I, for a short period of time, lived in Kingston, and the Clearwater would pull up to the waterfront where I literally had an apartment, and I just sat in awe staring at it, like, how can I get involved? I just want to go on this ship. It's beautiful. One more note before I get back to Rachel. Robin did say something in the chat. Robin, would you like to share a little bit about what you told us?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I've worked with Allison for some decades now. Hi, Allison. I'm on the science advisor for No Water, No Life. So it's great to see you all. Anyway, so I just was part of this other conference, and this now the head of climate and energy and environment in Boston City told about this Power Core program, which is, I think, going to happen in more cities around the world. And, I don't know if New Jersey cities are taking it on, but it seems like, I guess my point is that sort of mentorship and training are often separated, but in this program, it seems to be quite well married. And I loved I guess both Allison and Heather describing programs or places where there's mentorship, but then there's action, and doing something with that mentorship together. And also to, I think Rachel's one point I wanted to say, yeah, long-term mentorship is also really amazing. I have mentors who are from 30 years ago who are still saying, hey, Robin, why don't you try this? And it's a really wonderful thing. Anyway, I have a lot of thoughts, but thanks for that. So I look forward to hearing what Rachel has to say.
Yeah, so this event is more roundtable. We want, to hear everyone's thoughts. So if you want to chime in, raise your hand if your video's on, or comment on the chat, and we love this. Rachel, I just want to touch base with you for a moment, because you come from our NextGen bloggers, right? And I was wondering if you had any advice for in order for this generation to become effective environmental advocates, and what that would look like for them.
Sure, thank you. On a side note, I will say the boat building program sounds really interesting. I have no idea where I'm going to be, but I would love to get involved with that. I think I think what I really enjoyed about blogging was that I could reach out to anyone and everyone really who knew about a certain topic and knew about things that I wanted to learn about. And I think when you're as students, when you do reporting work or some type of blog work, or whenever you're writing and putting something out there, it's an amazing opportunity to just get on the phone with different people. And that can be huge. That can turn into job opportunities. That can turn into learning about new training programs. You definitely gain a lot of valuable mentors just from reaching out to people for an article, or just from asking people what their thoughts and their opinions are on a certain issue. And what I've seen is people love to share their experience. I've found so many great mentors in the science field, really willing and open to break down technical concepts and talk about ways in which people in the legal field can get involved with science stuff. And so I think recognizing the immense opportunity inherent in just writing, and not just it can be a really impactful thing, but the opportunity in writing about something, publishing it, and reaching out to people in that process, I think is really huge. And I think it's important to put stuff out there. It's important to try to get other people involved as well. Not just remaining in our academic silos a little bit. I feel like sometimes in academia, you can get really involved and engrossed in a project, and sometimes you lose connection with people out there. And I think explaining what you're learning to lay people and to people who have different skills and talents is super important, and really mentioning that and noting that in whatever work you're publishing is super, super important.
Yeah, definitely. Did you have something to add, Heather?
Yeah, just quickly, on that, I have to say, from the LRWP perspective, reading Rachel's blog posts on the other basins, with PFAS issues, she was writing a series about how different areas in the country are dealing with these contaminants. That was super informative for us, for me, so that's another piece of how it, goes both ways. She was learning from folks through these interviews, the opportunity to interview, for the purpose of the blog, but then, you had this tangible artifact, this blog post that then served to link us, conceptually. All of us are dealing with this PFAS issues, and we have a better sense for different strategies and different approaches. So it's just as beneficial.
Definitely. So I do want to be mindful of our time and just ask if either Rachel or Heather have any last minute thoughts to share with our audience today.
I think one sort of thought I've been having, and one advice that has been shared with me, and that sort of also guides me, is to not let the perfect get in the way of the good. I think in whatever sort of advocacy work we do and whatever programs we're creating, I think starting something and actually putting it out there is really the most important step. And so just being brave, being able to work out of our comfort zones and put something out there, and setting aside the need to be super duper perfect about stuff, I think is really important, and is an important aspect of advocacy and community involvement.
Thank you. Heather?
Yeah, that is so true. It's putting stuff out there, and maybe going back to the beginning of our conversation here, looking for those tentacles that you're putting out there, and how they connect with the other tentacles that others are putting out there, and making those connections and cultivating them and growing them through things like this. So I think this is great. Then telling the story about those connections too, because then that supports the work going forward. You feel sort of validated in the efforts you're making, not just in terms of the vision, but also in terms of the communication piece and the network piece. So yeah, that's great. So thank you so much, to all of you.
We have just a minute or so left, and I just wanted to open the floor to our audience to see if there's any questions. Feel free to raise your hand or throw them in the chat, but I'll leave that be for a minute to see if anyone wants to ask anything. Robin?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity. I guess my question is, are there funding resources out there that you know about that can support mentorship programs? I'm now at a tiny little land trust up here in Massachusetts. And if we had support, we might be able to support some mentees.
That's a fantastic question. Funding is such a huge part of everything. Heather?
Not per se, so the work that I've done around mentorship really has been primarily rooted in the formal academic institutions, so absolutely tapping students at Rutgers University, at our community colleges, Middlesex County Community College, Raritan Valley Community College, and not just the students, but in some ways it's sort of mentoring some of the faculty members to support the work you're doing as well, to see the value in applied learning. So I teach a course, I teach multiple courses, but I also have colleagues who teach classes. You want to sort of support them in knowing that this isn't just a hypothetical exercise, that the work that they and their students will be doing or are doing has real value on the ground. And so there's sort of and this is basically free, right? Except for my time, but in terms of other grants for mentorship, I'm not aware of any. However, there are schools, community colleges, high schools, environmental science clubs where you could start building relationships for strong mentorship experiences.
Thank you for answering that. Do we have any more questions before we say goodbye? And Allison, you're muted right now, but do you have any last minute thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would just like to say it's sort of that old expression, if you build it, they will come. We started that whole NextGen blog program by just opening it up to students, and they flooded in. They were dying for the opportunity. So I think that's true. And I also know that No Water, No Life started without realizing how much the scientists wanted to communicate with us. We were just going to go to the scientists to say, what should we be documenting? Instead, we went and they wanted to talk for an hour, 2 hours. So we started taping them. And then we had this Voices of the River aspect to No Water, No Life that's really enhanced the program so much. But they feel like they have a hard time getting their story out there. It's all about stories, and it's all about sharing. And so I think anything we can do to share and connect and communicate helps.
Definitely. We have a question from Larry. And you might need, good.
Yeah, hi there. I just want to pay my compliments to you all for Allison and her leadership and her vision for putting this together. I think that your focus on what we can learn from one another through mentoring is a great demonstration that the path to progress is truly paved with collaboration. And I think that the insight that you add to that in this wonderful conference is that we really can learn from one another, mentor as well as the individual that is being mentored. So thank you so much for holding this and including us all. This has been very illuminating and inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I definitely agree.
And Larry,
Yeah.
meet Robin Sears. Larry is president of the Tewksbury Land Trust in New Jersey. And Robin is the new president of the Williamstown Land Trust
Oh,
in
very
Massachusetts.
cool.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, good.
Speaking
good.
of connections, we'll just start now.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I love it.
You're a great connector. Nice to meet you, Larry.
Nice to meet you. Thanks to Allison. I've had the pleasure of connecting with the director of the Stowe Land Trust and with the Middlebury Land Trust. And I think once again, her promoting our fraternal connections so that we can compare notes and learn from one another is just another example of what Allison does that is so special. Thank you. We should talk offline.
That's good.
That ended on a very positive note, and we are out of time. We went over. I apologize for that, but I'm very happy with the way this event turned out. And thank you all for coming and for contributing to the conversation. Thank you to Heather and Rachel for being our first guests on our dive-in event, and I'm excited for what the future holds for these conversations in the future.
Thank you, Jenna.